folks, how's it going? Today I'm going to be talking about how you can set up test fixtures and set up data in your tests. So there's this mean boilerplate. It's very mean. Mean stands for MongoDB, Express, Angular, and Node. There's nothing really special about this boilerplate that I chose it for. I'm not saying that the boilerplate isn't special. I'm just saying that when I chose it, there wasn't any particular reason why I chose it aside from the fact that it has an API. It has a REST API that you can use. And what that means is when I sign in, which these great usernames and password we'll use here. Why did you fail? Oh, I need to start my server. That's why it failed. So to start the server, so I already checked out the repo, and I ran npm install. And now I'm starting the server. So I had Han Solo for the username, password was Chewbacca. Let's see if it copied it. Okay. So I already set up some data here, and you can add a fruit. So I'll call it test A, and the description is teast, and the price is, it's a pretty expensive fruit. It's one of those rare ones, and it adds it. And this actually persists. It stays in the database, in that Mongo database. And I'm going to open my console window. So I hit Command-Shift-I on Mac. You can also do inspect and then go to your console window. And in here, I'm going to drag this over, get a little bit more room, and jump over to network. Because what I want to see is if I'm going to test this, I want some test data that's reliable going into my test. Because if I want to check the price of something, like it throws a $sign in front of the price, I need to know what that price is going to be long term, or the date, that the date is correct, or things like that. So I need to set that information up before I run my test. Now, I can manually go in and add a fruit, but that really kind of sucks when you have these dynamic environments that get generated on every kind of change, which are really good because you can have this fresh new environment that you can run all your tests on, but it's kind of annoying because you don't have any of the data that you're used to, and so it makes testing a little bit harder. So what I want to do with this is basically run this add fruit command manually before I actually run all of my tests. So to do this, I'm going to kind of show how I would figure out how to add this data. What I did add a fruit, and then I'll name my fruit, and then I'll give it a description and a price. So I did that just a second ago. But the difference is now I have this network tab open in Chrome, and this is going to capture the network call that goes from my browser to the server. And the server is here. And so when I run this, this is going to drop behind because this is going to take focus. But if I run this and then come back, you can see it did this add fruit created with ID. This got logged out. And there was a post call to my API, and it took 62 milliseconds to run. So if I come in back into my console, into my network tab, I can see I've got two new calls here. I've got, this is my post call, and then this is my get. My get is basically the response from the server saying, hey, here's this new information. This is the one that I'm actually interested in. Not all the time you'll see this get. Most of the time you'll see just the post. So in the post, I posted to this URL. That's the API URL that I'm testing. Or not that I'm testing. I'm not actually testing this API. I don't really care about the API. What I care about is the front end. Now, with functional testing, you kind of do get to test the API side of things as part of everything. But there's no reason this couldn't be like a fake API that has fake data in it, which is another way of setting all that up. So that's all that to say that I don't really care about this. I'm just going to kind of say, okay, I'm expecting this to work. The API should have its own set of tests, probably unit tests and things like that are pretty quick. Okay, so this is the endpoint that I want to hit. I want to send a post. So there's different types of methods that you can send to an API. You can send a GET request, which is what this one was. That's a GET. And that's just saying, give me this information. The post is saying, here's some information, make an update on your side, and let me know how that thing goes. So that's that. We'll get into that in just a second, kind of actually understand why that's important for us. The status code is a code returned from the server letting us know if things went well or not. Usually it's accurate, sometimes it's not. And then there's a whole bunch of other details in here that we can mostly ignore. The only other thing that I'm really focused on right now, so there's this cookie that has user information. I don't know if I'm going to need that or not with this framework. I may be able to get away without it. But the other thing is this request payload. So this is the information that got sent to the server, and the server used it to figure out things. So before we get into the WebdriverIO side of things, I'm going to show you a quick way that you can validate that this API is going to work like you expect. So I'm going to open up a tool called Postman. Postman is really cool. It allows you to make basically REST API calls or calls to different servers and pass in information to it. So here I've got the type of request I want to make. So here's that get that I could send. If I do fruit and I set send, let's see. This gives me all my fruit that I've got set up. Here's my get to the fruit endpoint that returns all the fruits that I have. And then I also have, and I can preview this in JSON that makes it a little bit easier to read. Here's the fruits that I just created with their price and things like that. I can also post to that endpoint. So this URL doesn't change. The only thing that changes is that now I include in my body some details. So if I send this data along, it's going to give me an error that the key name is duplicated. So you can't have fruits that are the same name. So let's go with apple, and apples are a little bit more expensive than stuffs. So we're gonna put the price at 5. And we'll hit send, and you see it comes back with fruit created successfully called apple with some information, basically kind of replying with the information that you've sent over. You can also see some information here. Let's see, testers, no, not that, and I was wondering, oh, there's my status. Status of 201 created, basically that things went well. So that's what we're going to do in our test suite. We want to create an apple, or not necessarily an apple, but some sort of fruit. And if I refresh my page, you can see now apple is there with my price of 5 cents, which is a lot cheaper than I thought it was. How about some error between the keyboard? No, between the user and the monitor. Between the keyboard and the user. I forgot what that error is called. Anyway, let's go back over here. I'm going to open a new tab in the same window. So I'm going to just leave this server running for now. And then I'm going to go ahead and install WebdriverIO. And yeah, I'm going to do that. So I'm just going to do all the basic WebdriverIO setup stuff right now. Okay, that's installed. I'm going to edit my package.json to make things easier for me. Okay, I've got Mocha test. I'm just going to change this over to WebdriverIO. I'm going to ignore all that Mocha stuff. I could do like test : WebdriverIO, but I want it easier to run. So with that set up, I'll run npm test. This is going to set up my WebdriverIO config because it's not going to see a WebdriverIO config file there. Let's test on my local machine using Mocha. Install the adapter there at test/wdio */*star.js. And the reason for them being in there is that there's probably Mocha test in there as well. I'll set up my library. I will use Selenium standalone. And I could use Chrome driver. Chrome driver is pretty cool, but I'll leave it that. Install it, silent logging, good. My URL is almost localhost, but not quite. It's going to be localhost 8000 because that's what is set up via this script. And it's going to install. While that's installing, I'm going to jump into my directory go into my test folder, and then, so there are files in there. I'll just create this WDIO folder. And then from here, that got set up. I'm going to do Sublime Text. ST is my shortcut for Sublime Text. Test/WDIO/add, or let's just do get fruit.js. Describe. Okay, so I've got one test here called it should have fruit details in the table. And what I'm going to do with this test is I'm going to log in. So I'm going to go to this basic URL. I'm going to log in using my Han Solo and Chewbacca. And I'll go ahead and save that for later. Okay. And then, so I'm going to log in. I'm going to check the first row in the table and assert that it has my information in it. I'm trying to keep it simple because I'm a little low on time. But what I want to do is before all of them, I'm going to go ahead and do the login. So browser.url, just go to the main page. And then if I hit exit, what I'm going to do is check to see if we're on the login page. If we are, so I'm going to say if browser.isExisting login wrapper, which is an ID. So if we're on the login page, then we want to go ahead and log in. And I'm going to move this over to before each. So browser set value and set value of an input with an ID of username. And I'm going to set the value to Mr. Han Solo. And then I'll duplicate that for password, which is password. And it's going to be Chewbacca, and I don't trust myself spelling it, so I'll just come over there. And now I have that, and I need to actually log in. So I will click the submit button, and the best selector that I can see right now, I could go with like a submit selector, but with this italic tag in here, it could be kind of confusing. Or it could not be quite right as far as what this value actually is. So I'm just going to say browser.click, and then I'm going to pass in that login wrapper with a button. So I'm going to say a button element inside of login wrapper, and I'm hoping there's no other button elements in here, and it doesn't look like there is. So it's going to click that, and then I'm going to do a browser.waitForExist. And the reason for this is if I hit submit, we have this authenticating screen. So I want to wait until all this data is loaded. So let's see if I have an ID somewhere in here. There is this loading controller, table controller. If logged in, show it. Okay, so I'm going to use, this is a little Angular stuff going on. And I'm going to move this browser waitForExist outside of this if statement, because I want it to wait no matter what. So I'm going to use an attribute selector, which is started with square brackets. And I want to say the ng controller equals table.controller. So that's going to wait for that to exist. Let's go ahead and install chai, npm I chai. And then up here, we're going to constant chai is equal to require. Actually, we'll do expect. We're going to require chai and then use that expect protocol or assertion or whatever. I think I have other videos on that if you are interested in it. Okay, that's installed. I'm going to say expect browser.isExisting. I'm just going to expect somewhere on the page there to be text, td with text equal to Apple. This is pretty generic. There's pretty, we're going to expect that to be true. We're going to improve this, you know, just be patient with it, and we'll go from there. So I've got that. I'm going to run npm test again, and let's see how that goes. There's my Chrome window popping up. Oh, look, they got a little automated icon. It authenticated, and hey, it passed. It's so weird. It's so weird when it actually works. I'm so confused. Yeah, oh, it ran in Firefox too. It passed in Firefox. I've had such issues with Firefox in the past. I guess they finally resolved that kind of stuff. Should have fruit details in the table. Okay, so that's pretty cool, except what happens when you like completely wipe out the database? Let's see if we can wipe out the database. Is there any way to do that? No, I don't think so. But say you come in and the database is like completely wiped out, or we could just delete it. And then we run that test again. I'm gonna go ahead and run it one more time. Okay, so it logs me in, it authenticates, and this one should have actually failed. Excellent, expected false to be true. So this is basically like if we did a brand new environment, a brand new server that didn't have this data that we manually put in there, that would be bad. So this is where we get into the test fixtures and everything, all that work. And so what I'm gonna do is I can throw this in the before each, or I can add it in my configuration under on prepare. And I don't really know what I want to do because it really kind of depends. Let's add it to my before each. Okay, so I'm going to create a new file. Data setup equals require ... let's call it scripts/data setup. So I'm going to create this file and Sublime Text test/script/data setup. I kind of wanted that to be named scripts, but oh well. Data setup.js, and I should put that in the right spot. So in this file, I'm going to run my request to set up the data. And then I'm going to go ahead and export, well, let's see how I want to do this. Yeah, I'm going to export a function that runs the request. So I'll do module.exports. This is a Node.js thing, is equal to, and I can just export the full function here. There's other ways of doing this, but I'm just going to export that function. And it's going to do some things. So I'm going to do const request is equal to require, and then I'm going to do a request sync. I'm going to load the request sync module. What does that mean? npm install sync request. So basically this allows you to make an HTTP request in a synchronous fashion. Normally you want your request to be asynchronous because of you don't want it holding up everything, but when you're testing, you do want it holding up everything. You don't want to run your tests until these requests have gone through. So that's why we're going to be using sync request. That's installed, and now I need to require it. So let's see. That's the command to require. They use var. I'm going to switch that over to const just because there's no actual reason. It's just how it goes. And then this is going to allow me to make that request in a synchronous synchronous way. And then I'm going to say let fruit name equals ... And what this is going to be, I'm going to return my fruit name. Because my fruit name has to be unique, it's not going to let me create the same fruit again and again and again. And I don't know that I'm on a completely new server each time. I want to create kind of a fairly unique fruit name. There's another package out there called Faker.js, that will generate all this fake data, which is really cool. You can actually make a request to generate fake data. That's pretty neat. But now that I think about it, I don't actually need this. I'm just going to do a date time. So I'm going to have a fruit name. So fruit name is equal to apple. And then I'm going to include date.now, date.noe. Date.now is a JavaScript thing that just returns the number of milliseconds since the Linux epoch. Yeah, since January 1st. Unix epoch. Not Linux, Unix. That's what date.now returns. And so with that, I can kind of guarantee pretty much that this value is always going to be unique because it's never going to have reached that millisecond before because you know, if it ran in the past, it has a later time. Okay, so with that, I need to make my post request. I'll close that and close that. Come back here and let's see, we have our get request right there. This is the post request we want to make. I'm going to come in and say my local host. So I'll go back to my Postman, copy this URL, drop that in there, and then the JSON, copy that out, paste that. And then instead of Apple, we're going to pass in fruit name. I'll format that a little bit different so you can kind of see that this is all one function call. So that's we're making a post request to our endpoint. We are posting some JSON that has the fruit name with the description and a price. Save that. And then I've got my script / data setup that gets loaded. And so here I'm going to go in and say constant fruit name is equal to data setup. There, you can see it side by side in here. We will get the fruit name that gets returned from our function that gets exported out of data setup. And then we go here and we want to actually use this fruit name in here. But if I define this constant right here, it's actually not going to be, this variable is not going to be available in this function because these are two different functions. There's a function here and a function there. So I actually need to come out to here and say let fruit name. And I'm just going to leave that blank. And then here I'm going to assign fruit name. And then here I'm going to use fruit name. And the reason for that is you can see this is defined in this overall function. So it's available throughout. And the reason I went with let instead of constant is constant, once you set it, you can't change it. Let is basically saying once it's set, you can change it again and again. It's almost the same as variable, but there's a slight difference I'm not even going to mention because it's not important for us right now. So I define what I want to set, let fruit name. I'm going to do that. I will go ahead and log fruit name because I'm not 100% certain that this is actually going to run. And then once my data is set up, I'm going to go to my URL. I'm going to log in if I'm not already logged in. I'm going to wait for that table controller to pop up. And then I'm going to expect that the fruit name is equal to true. Let's run that and see if I did things all right. So there's our Apple ID that got logged out. And here's my passing test. So it actually checked that. And if I go back to here, you're going to see Apple, if I refresh the page, is available there. And it's got the price. And so I could actually come in here and do some validation that the price is correct and things like that. I could, when I pass in here, I could say my price should be something. So actually I'll do something like price is equal to 5. And then in here, I'm going to get my options. And then I'll do options.price, and that'll pass in that option. And I can validate using and expect that that price is the right value. But I'm just going to skip all that because that's a bit extra work. I don't want to worry about that. I'm going to delete that. Yeah, that's it. So if I were to like delete all this and then run this whole thing again, it would just work because I've got all my data set up happening before my test. And we could easily move this over to our configuration file into like a before or something like that. And then there's one last thing I'll go ahead and mention while I'm here. And that is a tool called synchronize.js, which is nice because sometimes you don't have an option to do basically a synchronous command. So maybe there's some command that you want to run that doesn't have a synchronous version. And you want to still be able to run it and wait until that thing is run before returning that information. So synchronous JS is pretty cool in that it sets up this thing called fibers, and you can run your synchronous command. So here they're reading a file, and then wait for all that to go through before going to the next step. So I actually used this on a recent project in order to do some file manipulation because these read files weren't quite synchronous. So they used to have callbacks and things like that. So I wanted to say run this entire file as just a plain script before moving on. And it was having issues because it would start running the file, it would see an asynchronous call, and say, okay, go ahead and do that thing. And while you're doing that thing, go ahead and keep moving on, which isn't what I wanted. I wanted it to stop, do the thing, and then when it's done doing the thing, move on from there. So that's why I wanted to mention this neat little tool can help with that. I'm not going to get into it now because I need to go pick up my kids. But it is a thing to be aware of, and it's a pretty cool little tool to help with data setup and everything like that. Thanks for watching, and see you later.